Hey everyone, welcome to Voluntary Virtues Roundtable. Today is July 15th, 2014, and as always, every Tuesday night we're live 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a really great show lined up for you guys today. We have a guest. He's going to be on the second half of our show. I guess you could say the last third, technically. He'll be on around 9:15 p.m. His name is Yasha Yakhnis. He is a wonderful pianist, piano, not the other nasty thing you're thinking of, and he's also he makes his own other videos on YouTube, and he's been in the Anarchy Rising or Freedom Rising series, whatever you want to call it. So always great to get his, what I consider considerably educated opinion on almost any topic. I have a variety of questions that I have, viewer questions, as well as a few panelists who I'm sure are going to have to get in their 2 cents and ask him and drill him a few times as well. But before I get too deep into this, I do want to welcome the panelists. How is everybody doing tonight?
Good to be here.
Good stuff.
Great.
Doing good?
Yeah, good to have you guys on. And, you guys know I'm not going to be here next week, so probably, who would have thought Robert would be running the show? I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm kind of dumping him with this now. I'll be probably just getting off the airplane at the time the show is supposed to start, so I'll be in San Antonio. Really excited about that, which this show is technically, you consider, subsidized or sponsored by White Clown, so but I really like what I do, and it's going to be a nice trip. I get to take Bryson with me the first time I get to go somewhere, but just a little FYI, I won't be here, but it's still going to be a wonderful show. Usually there's a discussion that takes tangents that maybe I wouldn't allow it to go on to, which is actually a good thing. So I would really highly recommend you guys stop by next Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For tonight, though, we have a variety of topics before we get to Yasha. One of the questions, which I think is a wonderful question just to talk about because it's had so much hype in the media, is the World Cup. And you're going to see some hype about the World Cup for a little while now until it dies off over the next few months. And then we probably won't see too much of it until, what is it? They have like mid kind of World Cup, but it's not really like the full World Cup. So it's like every 2 years they have something. It's kind of big with soccer, but really every 4 years is when the World Cup comes around. But we want to talk about where statism plays a role in this, voluntaryism, etc. So that's going to be coming up here within the next few minutes, actually. Also, we're going to be talking about a recent video that was just completed on the Voluntary Virtues Network channel just a few hours ago with Stefan Kinsella on Carlos Morales' show, Truth Over Comfort, aired here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. And it was discussing, Kinsella and Morales were discussing the NAP and spanking and, comparing and contrasting, finding out, is it against the NAP? Is it within NAP? So that's going to be another discussion. We're going to head off here in a few seconds. Also, we have to talk about this police officer who pulled over another police officer, much higher ranked police officer, a lieutenant actually, and the lieutenant bursted the door open on this other police officer. The police officer took the lieutenant to the ground. But it appears that cops, people often say the cops are above the law and that they portray themselves that way, right? Because they happen to get away with a lot of stuff. And there's obviously lots of truth to that. That's how statism really, that's one of the faults of statism. But it's really sad when the cops actually think that they're above like the other cops. On top of it, it just shows you at least the nonsensical, position that they come from usually with the police. And there's a new article on cracked.com which kind of goes with the original discussion on police, which lists off the top 4 reasons why more and more people are seeing the police as supervillains. Now, I want to take their 4 reasons. We're going to go over their 4 reasons, and then I want to kind of throw into the mix maybe my top 4 reasons. And so I hope you guys stick around for that. Also, we need to talk about a recent big meeting that Google had, where they actually, this is where they talk about flying computers and all kinds of nonsense, right? Really, I mean, great stuff. I hope they invest into something that will really work for them. Drones that deliver pizza, not bombs, right? But it was really interesting what they had to say inside of one of these meetings with Google, where when they were asked about why don't they go into healthcare, right? If you can make flying computers and stuff, surely you can do some great stuff for healthcare. We're going to get, I don't want to make a spoiler on that. I already kind of left a spoiler for the post that leads to this. But that's really a good discussion, so hopefully you guys stick around for that. Also, it's a really sad situation with the Pirate Bay founder, who has been imprisoned. Pirate Bay is really asking for help on this. So hopefully we have enough time tonight to get around to that topic as well. And then, of course, Yasha will be on from 9:15 up until about 9:50, 9:55, and then we're going to close out. So I also have a nice little joke. I think at the end of every show from here on out every week, I'm going to have a little closing joke it's kind of redundant because it answers itself in the joke, but I hope you guys stick around for that, or at least check back every week just to hear that last little 5-minute comment or question or statement, which I think is going to really be hilarious. So let's start off with, I think we really need to start off with this one first, the truth about the World Cup, right? Because that goes through my mind, panelists, is, well, there's nothing wrong with sports. I might not like it's almost jingoism that goes along with sports. Obviously, it's not, calling for a nation with borders, etc., like nationalism is. But it does have a nationalist underlying tone to it, usually, with the FIFA World Cup, right? The teams are somewhat funded through taxes some way or another, right? It's not like the government plays no role in this whatsoever, let alone doesn't corporatize it. Look at what happened in Brazil with the people who got kicked out of their homes. Eminent domain. Of course, they don't have property rights in Brazil. Who would have thought? Everybody always complaining about how poor it is. But one of the things about Brazil was they did have a lot of people who lost their homes to eminent domain, building the stadium that was built for in part by a lot of bureaucrats, making some big deals in the back end with a lot of corporatists. That's how the World Cup really plays out every year. Lots of money that is coming in to this foundation of FIFA, and it's, people say it's a private organization, but this is one of those questions: is where does private and public really play here? It's kind of like Solyndra, right? Solyndra would not have survived if it wasn't for subsidies from the public sector. Solyndra was the solar panel company, and they were all about turning green energy and something, which I'm not against green energy or anything like that. I love technology and advancement and all that. The problem was the government subsidies with Solyndra is what kept it going. It was a false incentive. It was a moral hazard from the start. I mean, we could have seen this coming to a bad conclusion, early ahead. Most of us did. But the point is, when government gets their hands into this, there is distortions, negative externalities that spur much deeper. It's like, like the ooze from Nickelodeon that just falls in every crack, or sand in your ear and in every crack of your body when you jump into the shower after you get out of the beach. It's that same type of analogy in my case. And so when somebody asks, what is the truth about the World Cup, because Stefan Molyneux makes these videos, the truth about, etc., XYZ, Gandhi, smoking, etc., right? I mean, all kinds of different things he has. I don't know if he has ones about smoking. The point here. So if I was to make the truth about video for the World Cup, it would talk about government subsidies. It would talk about eminent domain that takes a part in this, obviously the taxation. You have to talk, too, about the reason that they do the bread and circus show in the first place. I think we had a mention about this in another show, but we might not have gone in depth as we are going to tonight. When we talk about countries who need to go to war, when people hit the towers on 9/11, the politicians knew that they had so many people believing in the state and in America and all the rest of this nonsense that all they had to do was just reach in their pocket, like ring this little bell, and all of a sudden all these angels are born. Right? All of a sudden all these little patriotic people are coming out here of the woodworks to fight for their country, right? And so one of the problems we see with this whole ability to just control mass people on whims like this, to where it's not that it's involuntary. I mean, I guess technically the voluntary part, it at least it gives the facade of being voluntary, because you're allowing them to choose to follow you. For the most part, they didn't have to in their minds, at least. It's not like you held a gun to their head and forced them to like your thing technically, but you did steal from them to fund the public education system, to put them through the 12 years of propaganda, to give them the bread and circus this whole time, to condition them into this cycle. So that's the involuntary part of it. And this is what most of us are trying to express when we talk bad about it. We don't hate soccer. We don't hate people running around and getting great exercise. I don't even hate people going to fund and pay for a ticket to go watch other people entertainment, subjective theory of value, right? They might value the soccer event much more than you or I would, and to each his own or her own. And so that's well in line with voluntarism. Sports part's great, but all the rest, the part we have a problem with is the underlying, anti-non-aggression stance that is taken in this through taxes, subsidies, eminent domain, etc. I want to turn this over to the panelists and say, first of all, when you guys enter yourself, this is one of the people who said this the other day. Well, somebody didn't put their name down at the bottom on the lower third, so I didn't know who was talking, what that the name of the person was. So before you talk, at least the first time for the show today, say, hey, I'm so and so, and then go from there. So who wants to talk about what I might have? Maybe statism has gone past me in the creeks. And the ooze is pouring down deeper than I went. So who wants to try and go even deeper than what I just talked about? Anybody got any statements on the World Cup?
Yeah, I guess one little point that I would add. I'm Cody Limbaugh with liveallyourlife.com. One little point that I would add about that, besides everything you just mentioned, is the seeming justification that the states use to pull FIFA in and to pull the World Cup into their country is that it's going to be this economic stimulus for the people. And what we're seeing sorry, remind me where it is?
Brazil.
Brazil.
Or any place that's hosted it.
Anywhere that's hosted it, but particularly this year, I mean, it's so very obvious that this is not good for the locals. The region of Brazil that they had it in is an extremely poor region. They went out and took all of this land that could be productively used and built this huge stadium, which will probably be abandoned afterwards because nobody in that region can afford to attend sporting events of that magnitude. It's just a complete huge waste of resources. The money that's generated from the event itself is going to stay within government and elitist circles, as with most of the economy in Brazil. It's very disparaging. There's basically no middle class. It's extremely rich people and a whole bunch of poor people. And so even their mock justification for why they have these sporting events is just a joke. And everybody locally must know this, but for some reason the media likes to portray this as some big victory for these nations to be able to host this, but it's not a victory for the nation's people. It's a victory for the government and those big corporations that get to just rape resources from their own people.
I find it funny that even after all
Who are you? I don't know who you are.
Oh, I'm Garrett Lafferty, everyone. Admin on Sadism and Slavery. They didn't even win anything. They didn't win first, second, or third place. So it seems like all that talk was for nothing from them, saying that yes, this will be great for us hosting it, and that we're going to show how great we are at soccer. But
actually, you could argue economically that they're better off that Brazil lost because of all the partying and wasted time of resources that would have been just wasted and bonfires, etc. afterwards. All the hours of work that would have been skipped for the next week while people are drinking and wasting money on whatever drug of choice.
Well,
not that drugs are bad. It's recreation time versus this opportunity cost. Recreation versus production time.
Some Keynesians might say that with the
spurred the economy.
Yeah, it spurred the economy afterwards when they rioted for a little bit.
It's like quantitative easing, the easier form of quantitative. Now, quantitative easing is even easier than pulling off FIFA because with quantitative easing, you don't have to you don't have to get like as many people pumped up. Well, I guess with FIFA, people are begging you to do it. So anyway, either way, it's pretty easy, sadly, because you have the power, right? They have the power of the gun of the government. So good stuff. Kruger, you want to throw in something?
He's AFK.
It's all right, no problem. So here's the thing that really bugs me about it is there are lots of people, lots of videos all over the internet talking about the ills of what happened with FIFA in Brazil. And there was a lot of it's kind of like the Olympics. They really think they're going to make money, and usually the regions don't have. There's a lot of costs, like the bribe fee to trying to get the event to their place. They have to bid a whole amount of money just to do that, and then build the stadiums, which FIFA doesn't have to pay for the stadiums, right? So it's not like they're on the line for the stadium. So FIFA brings in a lot of money, and I don't see a lot of it getting kicked out. And I see a lot of it being protectionist efforts. Obviously, they use copyright, right? So they're going to try and use any trademark or patent they can get their hands on. And they had a big scandal with their licensing company actually, And so, it really is laced with so much statism. It's unbelievable. It's sad. It's a way to get that jingoism too back into the people. So the countries have an incentive to bring this bread and circus because it's so collectivized in the sense that you have like a team that really does represent a government or could be mistaken to that. With the San Antonio Spurs versus the Chicago Bulls, especially with like open borders between the states, theoretically for the most part, under the Commerce Clause, etc. There's not really not as much tensions as there are for foreign policy. You don't see, I guess, in civil wars would be the only real difference from that. But in most cases, there's not infighting in one region. It's people thinking of fearing from some external region, right? And so in one way you could say it does get people just to blindly accept whatever flag is being waved, because usually they have these huge anthems, and it's everything statism. Like for the first hour, they might talk about the players a little bit, but it's like, and the traditional jets since flown over since so-and-so, funded by this and this military, and it's, God, shut up, it's just, it's just giving, it's kind of like the digging the ditches, that's all it is to me. Everybody else gets a kick out of it, like, oh, wow, we gave this guy a job to dig a ditch. Look at him fly that jet over the World Cup. I'm so proud of him. Yay.
In a free society, without governments and all these things we call borders, and states, what would we have as teams? I understand that you think that it's great that people voluntarily want to pay for these things, and I agree. But I always think about that. What would it be like? Would it just be the team that you choose, or would it still be localized in some ways?
I think it would definitely still be localized. So in other words, the people from San Antonio in a free society, San Antonio is still going to be the region San Antonio. Even if you get rid of the initiation of violence in the region called San Antonio, people are still going to have to identify regions as something, right? They're going to have labels. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to label San Antonio, they're going to keep it probably the standardized process as it already is, which spontaneous order is probably what really gave the town of San Antonio its name, and somebody just caught on that, and then the city adopted it, right? But it was some individual who had a choice. That's spontaneous order, usually, and then the government had monopolized the process of the city and all the rest of the central planning that might have gone into it. But just because you have the region that's demonopolized now, people will still be calling it San Antonio, and they'll probably still say, hey, if they really like the players on the team, I'm sure, which the NBA usually tries, or any sporting event, they usually try to get, if somebody's reprimanded or in trouble with the police, it's usually a negative thing, right? They try to pick up people, they want the talent. It's hard to sometimes pick people that are like this rarity in the world and expecting them to always fall perfectly into your world as well, right? Because they're going to want to have their own, especially the youth that's required in most sporting. People who are 40 usually aren't the ones who are playing, right? When you're 40, you have kids and all that stuff, or getting rid of your kids or something that affected, they're moving out. But with most of the young most athletes, they're pretty young and they're living life. We all had those years we went through. So it's expected for them to have a run-in with the law once in a while, but it's really negative and looked down upon, right? Well, that's spontaneous order once again. Just because you have this city, it wouldn't be funded. Like the Spurs technically could still be the Spurs without any subsidies going into their stadium, right? They just like to pick that up because they realize they can go into the gun of government into the statist system and grab these corporatist advantage efforts, right, through lobbying. So they know they can just get free money. They're just going to go do it. You'd still have the Spurs, and people could still like the Spurs, and if they moved to Chicago, then they'd be a bandwagon fan like Chicago. The teams would be fine. It's kind of like saying, what would musicians do without copyright? Well, they'll still make their tours and make $100 per ticket, etc. David Matthews will be just fine. I'm telling you.
One exercise I like to do is just fun, is to seek out and observe anarchy in action as it exists now. And you can see this with sporting leagues too, and you get down to unprofessional may not be the right term, but into smaller leagues and local leagues and this kind of thing, is you see how it would work without the coercion. So I train a group of girls on a roller derby team, for instance, Breakneck Betties. And the Breakneck Betties are not necessarily attributed to a certain region other than the Portland area, but there are many other roller derby leagues in the Portland area here. So, or not leagues, but teams, I should say. And so we see this kind of spontaneous order already happening. I think you just see more of it in an anarchist society. Where you didn't have the coercion of the state, I think it's even arguable that you might actually see better competition, more competition, even a higher level of playing than we're seeing now, because no team would have these sort of monopolistic regional financial incentives to use big corporations and et cetera, et cetera. It kind of goes on and on and on. But anytime that we see the gun involved, you see anti-competition, which is what sports are supposed to all be about, is competition. Ironically.
Yeah, that is, isn't it? Robert, before we move on, did you have anything else to add? Go ahead.
Well, I think that people should really stop subsidizing the people who are already super mega rich. It's not like as if the Spurs, as an industry, needs the funding from the state in order to be successful. They've got plenty of money. They'll be just fine. They don't need your stadium to be built by you.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to get out here. The stuff is, it's just free money for them. They're still going to be rich in a free society too. Right now, they're just pretty rich. They also live in a state system, so they have some taxes and stuff, but they're going to make up for it on the back end, right? So they're going to get theirs. They're going to have their lobbying efforts. The state only helps these type of people screw over the rest of us. Whereas without a state, they can still, at least any money that they do make, we know it's legitimate, right? Or for the most part, we should at least assume unless they're doing some criminal activity, which actually really is truly criminal, and they're not just getting drained through taxes or making it through subsidies. All right, now, great stuff. So next I want to move on, because we only got about 45 more minutes with the actual topic section, so we got to kind of move through this quickly. But the next article I want to go over is actually going to be read over by Cody. This one is talking about why Google refuses to go into the healthcare industry. Cody, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so this is interesting. It kind of is a good lead-in, actually, from what we were just talking about with competition. One of the justifications for regulation and regulatory bodies over corporations, et cetera, is supposedly to protect people. It's to advocate for the consumer, it's to protect against monopolies, et cetera. But once you realize how regulation works through violent means, you also realize that regulation actually props up those very things that it claims to break down. So I usually don't like to read directly from the article. I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence here or anything, but I'm going to read just a couple of pieces because there's some interesting quotes. This article is not very subjective as far as just reading into what the interviewees said and then assuming. It's the direct quotes from the leaders of Google that are actually saying that regulation is the reason that they're not in the medical industries. So here's a corporation that is willing to take on flying cars and longevity and internet being provided by high altitude balloons and all these crazy, huge financially risky burdens that they're willing to take on in order to innovate, but they refuse to touch the healthcare industry. Let's see, I just want to, so in the words of Larry Page, one of the CEOs of Google, generally health is just so heavily regulated. It's just a painful business to be in. It's just not necessarily how I want to spend my time. Even though we do have some health projects, and we'll be doing that to a certain extent, but I think the regulatory burden in the U.S. is so high that I think it would dissuade a lot of entrepreneurs. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, that's kind of an interesting part of that quote, because if Google can't do it, who the fuck can? I mean, nobody has more money than Google, right? Or resources. Yeah, maybe on the books somebody has a little bit more, but it's all relative after a certain point. If you have billions of dollars at your disposal and it's still not feasible for you to enter the market, then who can possibly enter the market? Nobody can. The very regulations that are preached to the people as being protective and opening up competition are the very things that actually close off and stifle innovation and competition every single time. One other part of this, this is the last part I'll read here, and then we can move on to discussion. And this is by the article's author. says, on the face of it, it's pretty amazing that a company that doesn't think twice about tackling absurdly challenging scientific projects like driverless cars is brought to its knees by the prospect of dealing with a Byzantine regulation around healthcare, and more generally, our quote-unquote calcified hairball, end quote, system of care, as VC Esther Dyson has put it. A similar sentiment has been expressed by VC and Uber investor Bill Gurley as well. Evidently, taking on taxi and limousine commissions is more palatable than taking on the healthcare establishment. So basically what you have, what he's summing up there in that paragraph, is that the corporations that are already in place that are pretty much running the healthcare industry are helping to prop up the regulations. They're not kept in check by regulations. They are incentivized to maintain those regulations, to beat out any competitors or any potential competitors. And in the case of healthcare, blocking innovation and blocking competition is actually costing lives.
Yeah, it is absolutely true. And it's so funny how everybody says they want to get rid of the middleman. If you just go up to a regular person, it doesn't matter if they're Republican, Democrat, anarchist, totalitarian, and you just ask them, do you want to keep all the middlemen in whatever you're doing, X, Y, and Z? Most of them will tell you, well, no, it's not efficient. I mean, they wouldn't say the word efficient. They might not even know what that means, right? They would just say they don't like the word middleman. Usually it has a negative connotation, right? But that's what government is. And government is like the worst, most violent middleman that you could ever imagine, and people just keep inviting them into the relationships. It's like, what are you doing, right? Me and my wife do not need this other violent middleman in between our marriage, right? Why do you guys need to have them come in here and we don't want this bully, right? I wish people took it from that perspective. This is the thing. Nobody wants to go hang out at the table where a bunch of where bullies at, right? So they have this bully at the lunch yard, at the lunch tables, and he's basically sitting at the table by himself. Now he's stolen a lot of lunch money, right? And he's got a lot of connections because he's feared people into it. But nobody wants to go sit at the table with him because they know it's just trouble. That's basically what we're looking at here. Does any of the panelists want to pick up on this?
Yeah, the innovation part, it is insane how much the regulations aren't letting people realize what could be out there, right? With the Uber thing, the Uber, people see how that works, right? And they're able to, because there was nothing really on the book saying they couldn't do it. So people get excited over that. But with having all the regulation, they can't see anything like how innovation could work in the medical industry. And maybe that's the greatest tragedy of all. People don't have an imagination, and they need to see it in front of their face in order for it to work. And without the opportunity for that, it's never going to happen, kind of deal. I hope that there are other places in the world other than the U.S. that are experimenting with different types of things in the medical industry. I don't know, surgeries, drugs, things like that. And you can see even people in today's American society looking up these things, like looking up the medical uses of marijuana that have been used in other countries and seeing those effects and seeing different surgeries that they're allowed to do in different countries and going there to get those surgeries. Those things kind of open people's eyes, I guess. Yeah, I just really, it's fun. It's hilarious how Google doesn't want to touch it. Cody, you're entirely right. If Google can't do it, who can, right?
Good stuff. All right.
Can't hear you, Robert.
Yeah, Robert, we can't hear you at all. Microphone probably unplugged. No, yeah, I agree. I think Robert will probably be right back in the next.
There we go.
So, go ahead.
All right. So a lot of people don't realize how much regulation there is in the United States when it comes to the medical industry. Recently, I got into this big old argument with this guy. He's like, well, in Sweden and in Denmark and blah, blah, blah. You know what? They don't actually have as much regulation as we do. They have less regulation than we do. They just happen to have it paid for through taxes. The amount of regulation that actually goes into the industries there is less than ours. And another thing that people just open their eyes to, if you just pointed out, why is it that in the industry of optics, of eye care, that we've had innovations in contact lenses, in LASIK surgery, in eye laser surgery, all these different types of technologies that have been advanced and created. Why? Because there's not the same regulation. The same thing is true of stomach stapling and liposuction, things of that nature, breast implants. All of these industries have had huge innovations. Prices have dropped and plummeted because the regulations are not the same. It's because they're not as regulated. So if you want better quality healthcare for a lower price, you get the government to stop regulating it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is why it's really awesome to see a lot of the hospitals now, at least a few of them, and more coming, posting their prices online. That does incentivize competition. Usually their prices, they have to offer low prices. That's why they're putting them on the website, right? So I think that's a really good thing. I'm glad that the government doesn't stop them from doing that, because the government could. You could give it some reason like, well, lowering, that's going to lower the quality of care or something. Any excuse. There's a million that they could try to use. And then boom, you don't have even the ability to check the prices, and it's a corporatist measure that they had some lobby institute so that they could make higher profit, use pricing elasticity, from the lack of information in the marketplace. It's this is the scam that we're always under. So you guys are right. There's so many regulations that go into place. Obviously, I don't have to say too much more since Google said it all for me. Who else wanted to say something? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I just one other point about this that I think is sort of lost on most people is that these types of regulations and the very structure that corporations are in due to the government, the regulations, and the protections of the government is that it creates an artificial time preference. One of the objections I've heard to a completely free market is, well, how would there, if without trademarks and copyrights and everything, how would anyone have enough incentive to develop a drug that costs millions of dollars and 5 years to develop? Well, there's nothing that says that it will cost 5 years and millions of dollars to develop if it weren't for all of these regulation authorities. And on the flip side, besides having the regulations and the hoops and with the FDA that you have to jump through, and then this incredibly long and expensive process to approve a drug, on the flip side, you have these corporate protections that work on a quarterly basis. So if you don't show a profit for this quarter or whatever, then your shareholders are disgruntled, blah, blah, blah. Well, in a free society, in a truly free market, you would not necessarily have quarterly or annual business cycles. A business would either be profitable or it would not. And if they believe that they can innovate over a 5-year span to create an enormous profit down the road, they will have plenty of incentive to work for 5 or 7 or 10 years to develop a cure for something. And this a simple way for having somebody else beat them to the punch: keep it secret. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. There's a lot of ways to get around this whole facade that the government is creating of protecting these corporations on the one hand, and then pretending to beat them over the head with regulation on the other, when really all that regulation is doing is keeping people out of the marketplace. So anyway, this artificial time preference is something that we're asked to address as anarchists or as free market advocates, but the whole artificial time preference may not even exist in a free society. So just another point I wanted to throw out there. Robert? You're muted up again, buddy.
How about now? Okay. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, as far as funding of these types of innovations and creative ventures, when it comes to artistry, music, scientists and so on, there was a system of funding these things before the government ever created this concept called patent law or copyright law. It was called patronage, and there were people who were rich who funded their favorite artists because they liked what they did. They gave them money and said, go do stuff. Well, you know what? In the modern era, we all have a lot of money to work with if we get into a free market society. I mean, right now, if you go on to all these crowdsourced funding sites, you can see people funding all these different things that you're interested in ahead of time. You just say, I'm going to give this amount of money to these people to come up with their music album, which that has been done, or their solar freaking roads. That's being done, although completely idiotically, but whatever. It's not like you can't get the funding for these things ahead of time. So if you want to do your research into how to replace a person's kidney with coral, I know it sounds weird, but there's actually somebody doing stuff like that. You can do it. All you have to do is just get it out there, and people will fund what it is that you're interested in doing if they actually see that there's a potential benefit.
Yeah, right. The market price is, or the marketplace is always pushing. People want to see the next best thing, right? People want to have their lives improved, and if there's something that can do that, people are going to naturally invest into. It's kind of like you don't need a commissar pointing and telling everybody what to do. Some people actually think that about, like, you have to have that. That's what the president does. Every pencil was hand stamped by the president or something on this. We got to move on, guys. Great stuff, great topics. I want to talk quickly before we go on this quick break. I want to talk about the police officer who thought he was not only above the law but also above all the other cops. A lieutenant. Technically, he was above them in rank. But he really thought he's above everybody else in the world per se. Anyway, this actually happened out of Miami. A police officer was pulled over in a car. He was actually speeding. This happened last month. And he was in plain clothes. He was a part of the internal affairs. And he refused to show his driver's license. He said to the other officer, you can actually hear in the video, "Don't you know who I am? Don't you know who I am? Like, I'm higher ranked than you. I can speed and do whatever I want, and nobody else can," right? It's not that I'm saying I'm supporting their speeding laws or whatever. He's trying to say that there's a rule of law doesn't apply to him, right? So there's these rules that we're supposed to have, and everybody's supposed to follow the rules, which I agree with this stance on, non-aggression. So no murder, no rape, no theft, etc., no fraud. Taking that and making that the standard. Well, no matter what standard he even made for himself, usually people in the police system think that they're utilizing the rule of law, and everybody's supposed to be equal under statism. That's what they say to us, right? Or, we're all created equal, etc. It's in the Constitution, this document that says people can infringe on us. But this guy thinks he's literally above the law, tells the guy, I am your superior, right? So they get into a wrestling match, and the police officer actually knocks the older lieutenant onto the ground and gets on top of him. It just happened to be that there was 3 other cop cars that were driving right past the event, and they all stopped, pulled their car over. As you can see in the video, they pulled the cars over and tried to stop or go to see what was going on, trying to help out the other police officer at first. Then they all realized real quickly, within about 25, 30 seconds, who was on the ground, and the guy saying, "I'm your boss, get off of me." And so the other police officer pulled the initial police officer off of the lieutenant, and the lieutenant and him started getting into a yelling match. The other police officers, you can tell, they're like, "What in the hell is going on here?" Right? But they know that's the boss, lieutenant, and it all quickly hits. You can see all this happen in this guy's the initial police officers and the other police officers' mind the whole time. They didn't know who this guy was. Then they realized it's the boss man, and then the boss man gets the other police officers to start flipping it around on the first one. And so the initial police officer who pulled over the lieutenant for speeding, he knew he was going to be framed or backed into a corner. Well, he was at least smart enough in this case. Somehow he had his GoPro camera on a dashboard cam, and it was actually recording the whole time. He went into the car and hit it real quick so he could actually have all this on tape. And it was pretty funny because the whole time that they're talking, excuse me, sorry about that, I turned my phone off. So the whole time that he's talking to the police officer near his car, none of the other police officers think that they're being recorded. In fact, you can hear the other police officer saying, "Delete the footage on that camera. This never happened," right? Anyway, this has been supposedly kicked up to the people above internal affairs, which is supposed to be where this lieutenant's from. It's like the super, internal affairs, which really is a good old buddy system, which is after you're promoted, like where this guy was, and he was about to be, the lieutenant's about to be promoted, he would be where this people are who's going to say what he's doing. Technically, they say it's not a promotion, it's a lateral move inside of government or whatever, but supposedly make more money and it's a better job. So you come to your own subjective theory of value on that. But I think that what we're witnessing here is just another perfect example. This guy's got to be shot. The guy thinks he can just like point guns at everybody else and tell them how to live, but he doesn't have to follow his own rules that he sets, right? Or that he enforces at least. It's hypocrisy. Now, we're gonna have to go on break. I'm gonna have a second part to this, talking about Crack.com's 4 top reasons why cops are supervillains. But before I do that, I want to come back from the radio, or from the commercial break, excuse me, kind of summarize this and segue that in over there, and then we'll open this up to people afterwards. So, as you guys know, we are here on Voluntary Virtues Network, and we do thank you guys for checking us out. We are going to have Yasha Yakhnis on at about 9:10 p.m., so stick around with us here on Voluntary Virtues Network, and I'm sure you guys are going to have a great time with us. Thanks again.
You're listening to Voluntary Virtues.
Every day, your business is targeted by hackers, and your security can leave you vulnerable and defenseless for up to 45 hours from threats like zero-day attacks, spyware, credit card theft, and network infiltration. One employee downloading the wrong item can compromise your entire system. To date, no other security provider can protect you like White Cloud Security's trust listing technology. White Cloud Security's cutting-edge trust listing technology doesn't just block bad apps, but only allows apps you trust. This means that with White Cloud Security, you're in control of what's on your network. But what about malicious insiders? Not a problem with White Cloud Security's Snowden button. You can remove an insider's security privileges with a click of a button. Another benefit of White Cloud Security's new trust listing technology is we don't have to hire large teams to chase down malicious code, meaning the savings are passed on to you. Not only is White Cloud Security scalable for every business size, it's also easy to implement and won't slow down your devices. White Cloud Security is also fully Windows compatible, from the newest Windows 8.1 back to Windows 2000, with support for other platforms coming soon. With White Cloud Security, you're never alone, with a trust provider network that includes comments and ratings, enabling responsive customer service. In today's world of ever-increasing hackers and malware, no business is truly secure without White Cloud Security's trust listing technology. White Cloud Security is the future of device security. White Cloud Security. Application trust made simple.
Do you like gold and silver but don't want to carry around a bulky bag of coins? Would you like a more modern way to trade precious metals? Try Shire Silver Cards. They fit in your wallet just like credit cards but contain real value. Get some at shiresilver.com and enjoy the convenience of a better bullion.
There's typical Canadian media.
Just slather that donut with maple syrup.
Sorry,
Got a moose?
got my free baconectomy at the clinic.
Want to take a ride on my Zamboni?
And then there's Ed and Ethan.
So what's the solution, Ethan?
Well, according to Keynesians, we bury a bunch of money in the ground. We'll all be rich when we dig it up. Weekends on the Liberty Express.
You've read books, attended lectures, and you know the Constitution well enough to know it's a well-crafted blueprint to create an ever-increasing federal empire. But there's still one thing missing. Buttons! Freedom Fiends now has buttons. You'll get state speech is hate speech, guns and weed, buy sheep for sheep on sheep, and 2 designs for the Freedom Fiends. Wear them with pride. Use them to start conversations with statists. It's only $10 for 10 buttons, including shipping. Go to freedomjeans.com and click on the link at the top that says buttons.
Today's show is sponsored in part by Liberty.me, the new liberty-minded social media and publishing platform. As we're sure many of you know, anarcho-capitalist and prominent economist Jeffrey Tucker, who studied closely with Murray Rothbard, is spearheading this project. He calls it a city in the cloud, and he says it's going to revolutionize the way you think and interact within the Liberty community. Not only does every member get their very own turnkey publishing platform beautifully stylized, but they also get intimate connections with acclaimed industry-wide experts. Right now, you can secure your membership at 58% off and receive tons of extra perks by purchasing your membership through their GoGo campaign. Just head over to liberty.me and follow the links. Don't forget to keep up with their latest updates by following them on Twitter and on Facebook. Liberty.me. Liberty lives here.
You're listening to Voluntary Virtues.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Voluntary Virtues Roundtable, every Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We were just talking about the police officer, the lieutenant, highly ranked, 20 years in the police department, in the police force, law enforcement in general, and he was pulled over for not only speeding, but then afterwards, obviously didn't think he had to do any of the things that we're forced to do, like hand over driver's license or anything else. Actually gets tackled to the ground, is let go because he has seniority, right? Any of us might have been shot and killed over this. Of course, he gets away with it, and it looks like he's it's up in some investigation. He'll probably get some paid vacation and some time off. It's absolutely ridiculous that this guy thinks he can get away with this. And before I let the panelists really go to town on how silly this whole scenario is, I do want to talk real quickly about a cracked.com article that recently came out talking about the top 4 reasons why are really so terrifying and considered supervillains in some cases, right? So let's first start off with, we're going to go from fourth, third, second, and first. The fourth that cracked.com puts on here is that the local police keep getting anti-terrorism money. The list here is that the police are also getting free ex-military gear, right? And the second item, the number 2 strength reason why the police are being seen more and more as villains is because the military, which is also in many cases deemed as some people really have a high acclaim for it, but you'll see that most of people who really aren't in the military or have family that were in the military, they really don't care too much about it, right? But it is pretty popular still to this day. Do give them credit for the people who actually think like that, and there's quite a few of them. The number 1 reason that they say the police are seen so horribly today by most people is that soon everyone starts to look like a terrorist. Now, this is really a really good point, right? I kind of made my own top 4 reasons for this from my perspective, more voluntarist perspective than I'm sure crack.com is, right? They're usually more leftist leaning. Not that they're wrong in what they're talking about here. Most of the stuff that they were talking about is absolutely correct. And they're usually more comedy based too. But let's go through my top 4 reasons. And I kind of summarized their top 4, third, and second reason into one of them, and that's my number 4, and that's the military. Not only the money that the police get from anti-terror laws, not only the equipment that they get from maybe old military exercises or even live military equipment, not even the popularity, but all 3 of them really combined make it so that the police, that doesn't help their public image, right? So that was all encompassing into my number 4. Now my number 3 is actually their number 1. Right, and this is where we're all suspects, and this is really seen in central planning, where other people think that they're responsible for you, right? Because that's what statism is all about, is saying you're not really just responsible for your own life, right? If anything, you can divvy up your responsibilities to others. You can dump your responsibilities on others, and we want you to make sure that you control other people because you're responsible over others, supposedly in statism, right? This is the central planned mentality. We are not John or Mike Shanklin or Robert Kruger. We are citizen number 8,392,792,000, etc. Right? So you're just a number. You're a Bitcoin address to these people, right? Whereas with individualism and freedom, you're seen as a tangible, live, a feeling, a person who has actual feelings and emotions, individual, right? So statism makes it so that the environment of thinking that everybody else is a suspect is automatically around because you dehumanize people on the other people's individuality. So I listed that as my number 3. Now, number 2 reason why the police are seen so horribly is because of the victimless crimes. And it's really close with number 1. But number 1.5, if you want to call it this, 1.0001, really close to number 1 is what I'm trying to get at here, is victimless crimes. They enforce most of the laws on the books today are not against, no victim, no crime. They're not directed at real criminals. They create fake criminals, non-criminals, right? This is what victimless crimes do. Prostitution laws, anti-gambling laws, anti-prostitution laws, I should say. These types, anti-drug laws, they take people who might have been peaceful, who weren't infringing on other peaceful people, and they make them into the villains, right? So victimless crimes are going to, if you're enforcing victimless crimes, people like us and other freedom lovers who realize that the laws should only be based around anti-murder, anti-theft, anti-fraud, really tangible losses that you can when you actually hurt somebody else and initiate violence on somebody else. Instead, if you're just going around blindly supporting whatever politicians say, which most of the laws today are victimless crime laws, non-crimes basically, and you're arresting and kidnapping, that's kidnapping at that point, especially if you're not tackling a murderer and putting them in handcuffs. You're creating this new classification of criminal, which should never be criminal. That is a criminal act in and of itself, and hence is why it's right next to number 1 at number 2 in my list. And the number 1 thing that puts the police, at least in my book, and I think many other voluntarist books, is not even the police abuse that's on here. I think that can go into number 2, but it's the funding source behind it, right? The cage is not when you go to the protest and they have these sticks that they'd hit cattle with to try and spur them. It's not that is technically where the cage is and the boundaries are. People think that's the front line of statism. No. The cage is really your property, what you try and do with your labor and stuff. They steal 40% of that at the end of the day. They've stolen 40% of you, and not only that, it's backed up by the threat of kidnapping and arrest, and if you try to defend yourself against their theft and your property against their theft, they can kill you and get away with it, is what I'm trying to get at here. Taxes are what fund the police. And so when I'm looking at why I have such a distaste for the police, I have no problem with people who go out into the world and think they're, and actually want to be a part of a defense agency, especially if they're not using victimless crimes. That's well within voluntarism. You can have a defense agency. You can, go out there and defend other people's property and bodies for a fee. That's all freedom. That is freedom. That is, if you can do that and you're not harming anybody else. You're not infringing on anybody else. But the problem, really the root problem here that every police officer does, because not every police officer might enforce victimless crimes. There might be some guy, he might be fired in 6 months or 3 months or even 2 months or 1 month or tomorrow. There might be some guy who got in and is like, I'm not going to enforce, I'm not ever going to arrest anybody for victimless crimes. He might not hit the quotas, he might get fired, but there's that person out there still today, right? So he's technically not a part really of most of this, but every single police officer is a part of number 1. Every single one of them gets a stolen paycheck. Right. Their paycheck comes through a system of extortion and racketeering. Every single cop is paid. It's the revenue that comes into the police department. It's paid by the initiation of violence. If you do not pay, just because you lived in this boundary area that these other children set up and said, we can't, we're adults, but we're really children-minded. If you don't do what we say in our playground, we're going to beat you up and kidnap you and take half of your property and make us so you can't even really defend against us anyway. We're this big bully. So what they're doing is reinforcing this system of theft. And that's where the taxes come in. That's really the cage that locks us into the police. So you don't even have a choice whether to fund them or not. Yeah, you're talking about, you think you're upset at Best Buy because they didn't hold up on some warranty because of some crack that you maybe even caused on a CD or something like that. Man, try getting a refund from government, from the police department. Try saying, I don't want your services anymore, Mr. Policeman. Thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, right. Jail. Not just, here, we're stealing your stuff anyway. If you really actually try to resist, they steal your stuff more than they were going to steal it beforehand and throw you into a cage because you're their slave. So cracked.com comes up a little bit short. This should be titled The Real Top 4 Reasons Why the Cops Should Be Viewed as Supervillains. Anyway, I want to open this up to the panelists. You guys can talk about the lieutenant who thought he was not only above the law but above all the other cops. Or, and also to segue it into this, any comments? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in there. Is that all right?
Go for it.
Yeah, 2 things just real quick. The first article, first of all, it just kind of made me laugh that this guy was kind of bullying his own people anyway. But I think one aspect we can take from that is that you just can't separate individualism from reality. Like, we are individuals and they are individuals too. They don't think of people that way. And the reason I say that is he's saying, don't you know who I am? So here they are, they're trained in this sort of collectivist thinking of being above the law because they're officers, but he still has to take that on in his own persona and his self to think that not only is he above the law because he's an officer, he's above the law because he's above the other officers, and it's we still take on these individual traits regardless of whatever collectivist mentality that we're.
The king should have exemptions.
Yeah. No,
I
no
have
matter
my presidential executive orders over here, son.
You're right.
Yeah, that's actually my point. That's my number one thing is the double standard. That's, to me, that's the thing that's actually the biggest problem with the criminals that are the cops and the politicians and so on, is that whatever the rules are, they don't apply to them.
Yeah, it's just a minor case of.
I had number 0 on here, and I think under that was statism. So I think that falls under my number 0. No, I'm just joking around. Great work, Robert. I agree.
That double standard is becoming more obvious too, and that kind of brings us to our second point. My second point on this is that just the other day, it's a really stupid kind of minor example, but my son has registration that is out of date, and he sees this cop parked on the road that he's going down already. It's too late to turn around or anything, so he has to pass this cop. Gets all nervous, freaked out because this cop is now tailgating him. And because the cop is tailgating him, he's focused so much on the cop that he bolts out from the stop sign and accidentally cuts off another car. So he gets pulled over. He gets a ticket for reckless driving. All because the cop was tailgating to begin with. The intimidation factor is, So that's ironic enough in itself. But the next day, no, it was the same day, my son and I are driving in the car, and the cop pulls up beside us and just fucking blows right through a stop sign. His lights aren't on. Nothing is there was no emergency situation. He just rolls through it and just keeps going. And my son is just about to have a heart attack because he's just freaking out, pissed off at the double standard. But that's kind of a funny anecdotal example. But the second article, which brings me to my point, is that if Cracked.com is putting this out there, kind of a liberal comedy rag is putting it out there, it kind of gives me hope that the hypocrisy and the just idiocy of the whole thing is maybe becoming a little more apparent to the mainstream, and people all over are starting to wake up. Because sometimes, as a libertarian / anarchist, voluntarist, capitalist, I obviously we're fed what we kind of want to see because of Google Analytics and all these kind of things. Our search results kind of come up as catered to our personal tastes. So sometimes I wonder if my Facebook feed is not very representative of what the rest of the world is seeing with all this cop block stuff on there. Cop with a P, cop block. But the fact that this is in Cracked kind of gives me hope that maybe everybody else is kind of waking up on this too. So I guess I'll stop rambling and let somebody else go.
I do wonder if this is going to get a little more.
Yeah, I think that this police officer getting into trouble and two people talking at once here. Okay, so I think that this is all the more reason that they all need to wear cameras. In a free market society, I would only pay for a security service where they had a camera running 24/7. That's why. That's the only reason I'd pay for it. I wouldn't call it even a police service. I'd call it a defense agency. Yeah, that's all. That was my little comment. I know I'm delayed as hell.
Fair enough.
With the amount of publicity that Cracked generates, the amount of viewers that they have in their audience, it is kind of nice to see that they're actually jumping on board. But they're not the only ones. I mean, if you go to some of the local news broadcasts, in New Mexico, for example, with the aggressions that the police officers have been doing here, killing people. I mean, it's not a week that goes by without somebody being killed by a cop in some situation, it seems like here. But they're getting publicity in the news here because it's become a part of the mindset of what people are interested in, and I think that we are changing as a society to become more aware of these types of things. But then the thing comes up is how far are they going to take it? They're just going to think that it's an isolated occurrence or just an oddity. They're not going to actually see that it's becoming, that it actually is an institutionalized part of the system. They're certainly not going to investigate whether the U.S. government has been buying all this hollow point ammunition and all these different guns because they're worried that there's going to be some sort of civil unrest. They're not going to pay attention to that. They're not going to go into checking out whether the FEMA camp thing is a conspiracy theory that actually is true or false. They have no idea. So it's nice, but I think that getting people to go into the underlying thought process, it's going to take a lot more time.
Yeah, that's one hopeful part or aspect of this Cracked magazine, though, is that it's not necessarily featuring an isolated incident. They are, even though they may not be as deeply rooted as you and I, they at least are hitting some general ideas as far as the corruptness of the very institution itself. So I guess that's where I was going with a little bit of shimmering hope. I'll be the Jeff Tucker optimist for the day.
It's getting a little bit better. It's definitely getting better. I mean, they at least have been addressing some of the concepts, which is nice.
It's funny how they never seem to understand how their laws, though, that like the progressive laws that they want to, they don't like the military, they don't like war supposedly, it's the left stance supposedly, but they like every other law and regulation under the sun, but they don't see that you need the policeman to enforce the law. It's like the people you just made fun of and that you keep cutting down, that is the end of that regulation you keep pushing, How do you guys not see that? It's just kind of like that's what you're doing. You're saying that regulation guy shouldn't be the way he is, but let's still push through those regulations, even though the regulation guy's been the same for forever, it seems like. It just doesn't make any sense, It's just, I guess they're not really thinking that far into it, though, right? Kyron, how you doing?
I'm well. I don't know why my camera just turned off. But yeah, listening to this, I wanted to touch upon what Garrett said about he thinks cops should have cameras on at all times. They know how to turn those cameras off, the cops that do have them. And then also, people are going to have to pay for those cameras with tax dollars. So I don't support anything that goes towards anything that offers it to the state. I know you said that if a private security firm, they would have to have cameras on at all times, on themselves at all times, in order for you to pay for it. So that was a caveat. But in this system, people often advocate for cops to be sort of armed with cameras at all times, and somebody's going to have to pay for that. So now, to the point of people waking up to the reality that the police, what role they actually serve in civilization. And I say civilization to make a distinction from society, because I feel like the two are not interchangeable. I feel like civilization is what we live in now, and society is what we aspire to live in. And I kind of blanked on my point. To the premise of, and this is me filling in. But let's see. We were talking. Oh, I saw a news reel of a woman whose husband assaulted a worker at a Walgreens and took the worker's concealed carry weapon and started shooting police officers. He killed one, and the rest of them, the rest of the cops stood over him and assassinated him after he was already down. And the lady, his wife, was interviewed by the news station, and she said that if they shot her husband in the way that it was reported, then she wished that he had taken out way more of those cops. And the news article, the news snippet, the reporter was saying that it's these black males and these black men and their mentality of anti-authoritarianism, and it's a perverse, and this is their culture, they're perverted. And this is like the most racist shit ever, and like and I make a distinction about racism and bigotry, right? Racism is that done the bigotry performed by government agents in their role, their official role. considering that the government subsidizes heavily corporations and news, corporate news, this guy's a government agent. Yeah, credibly racist. And it's so funny that Cracked is putting out an article saying that people are waking up and seeing the police as supervillains, and they're just, it's this crazy juxtaposition of, on one hand, people are seeing it, but on the other hand, they're calling people who do see it, you know, just anti-authoritarian, perverted, cultured people.
Yeah, they're pointing the finger at some of these people saying, nut jobs, nut jobs, nut jobs, and then at the same time, we're getting a message that's saying, well, yeah, these guys are villains. So, you know, which one is it? Make up your freaking minds, guys. Are the police doing wrong? If so, then fighting back against them isn't wrong.
Cognitive dissonance. When you get rid of it, you'll become an anarchist.
Yep. Seems like Michael is trying to get things set up with Yasha. So while he's trying to get that set, I just wanted to do a quick couple of points about the video that I was going to talk about. I know that we're going to have to go to the conversation with Yasha here in just a moment anyway, though. Marky.
World's loudest vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Basically, they were talking about, is spanking a violation of the NAP? But actually, this the story that they're basing their discussion a lot on some of the different stories that you might have seen referenced in Stefan Molyneux's videos, or even on Voluntary Virtues, where we talked about it, where they had some recording devices placed on some parents to see how often they spanked their children, and to see how effective it was, just to see, you know, when it was used, what was the environment, you know, prior to this spanking and so on. So they were really going at it from a practical sense or analytical sense, not necessarily a. They weren't necessarily looking into it as a NAP violation, at least in a lot of the video. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the whole video is related to that. Obviously, the non-aggression principle applies that if you are causing someone who does not consent to it bodily harm, and we can fairly easily see that a child is not consenting to being spanked, that it is a violation, even though they may not have the the ability to say, you know, I'm not going to create a contract because I don't have the comprehension level to make a contract. It's not a you don't require a contract in order for the NAP to be valid. You just have to have self-agency. You have to be self-aware, the ability to decide what happens with your own body, and how can you use your body to do stuff. You decide that that's a personal choice. So that's the point at which if a baby can move its arm of its own volition, it's obviously self-aware, and the NAP would apply. So anyway.
Yeah, sorry guys. We have a huge storm coming through, and my internet connection went out. The power, everything went out. Anyway, we're back now. So obviously we moved on. We only have about 10 minutes left. So talking about NAP and spanking, you do agree? What were your thoughts on the Carlos and Kinsella conversation? I think that one was a pretty good one.
Well, the big thing is they were talking about efficacy as to whether it actually works. The consequentialist type of thing, in saying, evidence shows that it doesn't, and it actually causes the child to become a more violent type person, to become more likely to commit suicide, things of that nature. So there wasn't a lot of breaking down what the NAP is, as far as what a person is, what are the requirements for having NAP qualifications. Let's say, for example, a child is not going to consent to, or doesn't want to have their tonsils removed, but if they don't, they may have some sort of serious medical issue, forcing them to go through some sort of medical procedure to prevent these problems, well, actually, yeah, you're going to have to persuade the child, in my opinion.
Yeah, take the Magic Johnson AIDS cure thingy, son. I'm with you. I know what you're talking about.
Actually, you know, Robert, we had a discussion, I think, on an After Hours a while back on a similar topic, and somebody, I'm sorry, I hate it when I have brain farts like this, but anyway, somebody brought it up that even if you, as a parent, you're violating the NAP for a greater benefit, it's very similar to the argument of violating the NAP to keep from starving to death, breaking into a cabin in the woods, etc. That child actually may have redress against the parent according to the NAP. However, in hindsight, the child may also recognize that, hey, that was for my own good, and therefore choose not to come back against the parents for redress. We were actually talking about the topic of circumcision when that came up, but I think it's equally true for any medical procedure or maybe even discipline. Hate to say that because I really believe that you can be a more effective parent without spanking. However, violating the NAP as a parent may have, on occasion, like the medical example, a benefit to the child that's greater than the violation, but that does not exempt you from redress.
Yeah, that was the point that I brought up before, where we were talking about the people conflate morality with two different things. That there's pragmatism, and there is a right of redress or a claim of damages or loss by an injured party. So if there is a train that's going to go down this road and it's going to kill 14 people, or you could switch the line and it'll go kill this one person, should you do it? Well, okay, maybe if you like the people that are on the one side and you don't really like the other person, maybe you do that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. If you save those lives, it is a pragmatically correct choice, sure. But the person who you killed, their family, their agents have a claim of damages against you, period. And that cannot be absolved by saying, well, I saved all these 14 people. Well, you know what? They can pay your bills. They can go ahead and fund the payments that you're going to have to pay to our family for the loss of our son. You're going to have to pay for it. Maybe you can get them to help since you saved their lives.
Don't give the troops any ideas, because then everybody's going to have to pay like quadruple for all the other troops that are alive. Yeah. Just joking around. Go ahead.
So I actually
this is the last thing I just want to say. Kyron's the last one we have tonight because we got to move to break and then bring on Yasha. Go ahead.
I thought of a funny situation in say an anarchistic society in which parents are hiring third-party parenting firms in order to raise their kids in order to avoid litigation from redress at a later point in time.
It's like antinatalism, Robert, remember? Well, I'm mad that my parents gave me life. I hate it. I have to think about suffering and death. And well, in that case, we're going to award you that in this lawsuit versus your parents, you beat your parents. Now they have to fund your putting you to death. So. All right, guys, great stuff. Always great discussion here on Voluntary Virtues. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be here till 10 p.m. We have a really great guest coming on in the second, or I guess last third of the show, Yasha Yakhnis. We'll be right back, guys, here on Voluntary Virtues. Thank you guys so much for checking us out every Tuesday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
You're listening to Voluntary Virtues.
Outdated and old-fashioned antivirus companies are going extinct. With all the new viruses and malware being created, there's no way for the current industry to protect you from all the new threats. Where traditional and outdated antivirus companies can take up to 45 hours, almost 2 days, to detect a serious threat, White Cloud Security protects you from these zero-day attacks and viruses before they're even written. This is because White Cloud Security doesn't just let anything run on your computer, but instead only allows programs and applications that you trust. And White Cloud Security was made with everyone in mind, from your grandparents to Fortune 500 enterprises, personal and business. White Cloud Security's cutting-edge technology uses little computer memory because the code is clean, written by computer security experts with decades of experience from the top security companies, meaning you are receiving an industry-leading, top-dollar product at market-bottom low prices. Because we don't have to hire large teams to chase down malicious code, we can make our services more affordable, meaning the savings are passed on to you. White Cloud Security is also fully Windows compatible from the newest Windows 8.1 back to Windows 2000, with support for other platforms coming soon. Outdated blacklisting antivirus companies can't compete because they can't protect you like White Cloud Security's cutting-edge trust listing technology. White Cloud Security isn't competing with antivirus companies. It's making yesterday's antivirus companies obsolete. White Cloud Security. Application trust made simple.
You can help the Freedom Fiends without even spending a post-1964 dime. Download uTorrent and start seeding Fiends episodes and DVDs to help keep us drone-proof. There's a Torrent Club link at the top of freedomfiends.com. There you'll find our Torrent RSS feed and instructions to grab past episodes and automatically download new ones, even while you're away from the computer. Leave your computer on, seeding the torrents while you're at work or asleep. The more people seeding the Fiends, the more drone-proof we'll be when the poop comes down.
Barack Obama is trying to change political fashion.
Barack Obama was seen Thursday wearing a black and gold flag pin sold at shinybadges.com.
Obama has said his story wouldn't be possible if it weren't for the values that pin represents.
Voluntaryism is a philosophy of property rights and non-aggression.
That's not our flag. If you wear the pin, then you're not a true patriot.
Barack Obama does not approve of his message. Any similarity to any real president, alive or dead, is purely coincidental. To see quality liberty-themed Republicans, go to shinybadges.com. We accept silver, Bitcoin, and for a limited time, even Federal Reserve notes. This message was brought to you by the letter V.
Now, my fellow Americans, there are a lot of terrible things on the internet, not the least of which is ChristopherCantwell.com. Now, let me be clear. This is not your average partisan bickering. This is sedition. He is an anarchist. He is an atheist, and he is an asshole. If you read this blog, you may be indefinitely detained without a trial or assassinated by a drone, so don't do it. God bless the United States of America, and goddamn ChristopherCantwell.com.
Attention humans, I come to you from a desperate future, one in which all of the humans are dead. For many years we have been running calculations to determine the most impactful point of failure that led to the demise of your species. It has been determined that too many of you were not listening to the Ed and Ethan podcast. Listen often, share with your friends, donate to the show, and visit edandethan.com. You have been warned.
Americans are so rebellious. Calm down and listen to two composed Canadians. And this is how you end up with police cars burning in Acadian City.
Marriage? It sounds about as smart as straight marriage.
Political action!
No thanks.
Ed and Ethan, weekends on the Liberty Express.
Hi, my name is Leah. I'm a homeschooling mom, and I'm also an independent recording artist. I love heavy metal and Celtic and world music, and have a lot of fun fusing together different elements. I'm also a big believer in libertarian ideas, and I think it's crucial to communicate the need to fight for freedom and oppose tyrannical powers, whether it's in the form of political analysis or Middle-earth folktales. It's an exciting day that we live in, and I hope to contribute, even in a small way, in the fight for freedom. Join me in recording and producing my third studio album at www.leahmusic.net.
Do you like individual freedom, self-ownership, responsibility, peaceful interaction, or just politics and philosophy in general? Do you like articles, videos, pics, and memes, informative materials that educate on a free world? Then you need to join the #1 largest voluntarist Facebook page in the world, Statism is Slavery. With multiple passionate admins and a drive to bring you the facts, not only pertaining to economics and or politics, but life in general, Statism is Slavery is your #1 spot to connect with almost 175,000 freedom lovers. We also have a free bumper sticker giveaway for best comment almost every day. Just go to facebook.com/statismmakesYouAslave or simply search for Statism is Slavery on your search engine and click the like button to subscribe. Thank you for supporting freedom by supporting Statism is Slavery, the #1 voluntarism Facebook page in the world.
You're listening to Voluntary Virtues.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Voluntary Virtues Network, live every single Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a wonderful panel for you guys, wonderful show lined up. We just went over a variety of topics the first hour and 15 minutes. We're lucky enough to have a wonderful guest joining us. His name is Yasha Yakhnis. He's actually been with us on the show before. For the live version, I can't include the link, but obviously for the recorded version after the archived version, I'm going to go ahead and put a link up here so you guys can go ahead and see that last video that we had Yasha here. For those of you who don't know exactly who Yasha is, he's actually a 21-year-old scholarship student at the University of the Pacific. He's currently pursuing a Bachelor of Music in Piano Performance, and I'm telling you, he's really, really good. He's actually completed half of an economics degree as well. He's received honors in many piano competitions, including second place in the state finals of the 2010-2011 CAPMT honors. He has additions of $2,000 scholarship, the 2011 Bernice Bernardo auditions. He's been inducted into the Pi Kappa Lambda National Music Honor Society. Just, I mean, I could go on for hours about how absolutely amazing this guy is. And on top of all these other great achievements in life, one of the largest achievement, the biggest achievement to me at least, is the fact that he is a extremely principled voluntarist. So Yasha Yakhnis, welcome once again to the Voluntary Virtues Network. The first time on the actual network, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, how are you doing today? Pretty good?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Hey, good to have you on the show. Before we go, because everybody already has heard the past about where you came from, etc., I want to get right into topics and issues today. And if you guys once again want to see where he came from, click on that original link to go to the original video. But Yasha, I'm curious, out of what we've been talking about so far tonight, obviously you just heard the last bit of where Kruger and I, and I guess everybody here, was talking about spanking and how it's against the non-aggression principle. Stefan Kinsella and Carlos Morales made a video. Any thoughts on that while we're here on this topic?
Not on that video in particular. I do have some thoughts on the concept of children's rights and in particular infants' rights. And you alluded to one of the topics which I wish to discuss, but you were focusing mostly on spanking, and that, to be honest, that is one issue. I'm not a parent, obviously. That is one issue which I haven't fully thought through yet. And there is, I want to bring up a scenario, and so I want to bring up the question: would spanking possibly be justified in an extreme scenario like this? What if, for example, a child wanted? What if a child did something really crazy, like he did some seriously stupid thing which could result in the house being burnt down, even after he was warned not to do it? Do you think that in a situation such as that, spanking could possibly be justified? Because, well, arguably that child is committing an act of aggression by negligently trying to burn the house down even though he was warned. What if it's an extreme scenario like that? That's a safety issue. I mean, I think in most cases when parents spank children, they probably don't need to do it. I think there are better means of discipline. But I think if an adult were trying to burn, if an adult were doing something extremely careless or stupid like that, it might even be justified to give an adult a smack, and I think a lot of people would do that. But what is your take on that?
Well, being that you're a parent, it is your responsibility to take care of the situation that your child is in. So providing them an environment that is without the tools to, commit arson might be a good parenting technique. Keeping them in an environment that is more safe than, and less risky. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we've got a child who is, 7, 8 years old, very creative in their abilities. They know how to pick locks. They know how to get into the places that they're not supposed to be. So they can get access to the wonderful things like matches, gasoline, and so on, that you should theoretically protect them from. Well, the question that I would have is, what would you do with an adult then if that were the case? Well, you would put them in a situation where they were confined in a cell for a certain period of time. That doesn't seem to be a very effective way of resolving an issue either. Would you hit the adult? I mean, That doesn't seem to work very well either. No, you persuade, you discuss, you have conversations. And if you're not able to successfully persuade and have a conversation with a child to get them to stop, breaking into these places where they've got gasoline and matches and so on, then you need to, basically get them in a situation where they don't have access to those things. You change the environment. So if that means moving, then you move. If that means that the child goes to live with a different relative who lives in a more remote location and doesn't have those types of things on their property, so be it. If you outsource the child to a group that has, I don't know, let's say a camp where they take care of the kids, then you certainly could do that as well. I don't think that it's a good idea. I don't think that you should be doing that with your child. I think you should be bonding with your child, and as an adult, have a good relationship with your child. But certainly, you don't justify using violence against another person for their potential harm that they're going to do that they're not in the process of doing. If you're in a situation where the child's got the matches or the lighter, and they're on their way to putting that lighter to the flame, they're putting the flame to the gasoline, and you don't slap their hand, the fire's going to go off. Obviously, you slap their hand. You would do the same thing with an adult. So it's not. I don't think that it's a very tough question to answer. It's just don't provide an environment where they could do it. Be a more proactive parent instead of depending upon assault being used to coerce appropriate behavior.
All right,
Yeah, I would say the primary means of dealing with such a situation should be persuasion, but I still think in an extreme scenario like that, if persuasion doesn't work, then I believe it may be necessary to turn to more extreme measures, and perhaps not corporal punishment. Perhaps there are other means. There are other unpleasant punishments besides corporal punishment, such as I don't know, taking away privileges for an extended period of time. That could be fairly unpleasant, and the child probably would not want to suffer such consequences. And I think one thing that's important is when you do apply consequences, you need to be consistent. If you and I think almost everyone would be consistent when it comes to extreme situations like that. But if you're going to enforce rules, don't give multiple warnings, because then the children will receive the message that they could receive potentially indefinite warnings, and your authority will basically degenerate over time. And that's just my perspective on parenting. I'm not a parent.
I had one more quick point on this. A lot of people don't realize how effective changing their interests works. If you've got a child that is really interested in fire, show them fire. Actually go through how fire works. Like, take them out into a parking lot or some other location where it's safe, and set fire to stuff. Blow stuff up. Have fun with it. Show them how, all right, yeah, you know what, burning stuff is kind of cool. Our house, not so much. Don't want to do the house. Okay, we can actually go out and burn this, that, the other thing. And then get some of the video that they have of the slow motion photography of fires burning. And, take them into, have a conversation with your local voluntary fire people. The fire department, they might have people who can, show them, hey, you know what, this is what we do when we're doing our training, and have discussions with them about those types of things. Show them how sulfur works. Have a lot of discussions about things that are of the interest to them. If they're interested in fire, then study it, but don't you don't have to use a punishment to prevent the behavior that you're worried about. Instead, provide an alternative.
And not only that, which is a great phenomenal point. Something else may catch their attention. just as equally as the fire aspect of it. But also, just using incentives to get them to do the behavior that it is that you want them to do. Just like in capitalism, you would incentivize people to provide services or to buy your product by offering it at a cheaper price or offering more service with it or whatever in order to influence the market. Again, offering punishments and coercive acts is the antithesis of what we hope to create, and using it on children doesn't help foster that type of society. So I would say, look at, Stefan Molyneux talks about this a lot. Look at children sort of as customers. They don't get to choose, but you should really treat them as they are, your customer.
No, great stuff. Great stuff. All right, let's move on to another topic. Does anybody have a question? I have plenty to ask Yasha, but does anybody else have a question for Yasha right now?
I did want to ask him about what is his view on circumcision.
Oh yes, and that is an issue that I feel very strongly about, and I've been quite active in the so-called intactivist community lately on Facebook. I'm part of this closed group called Intactivists Stop Circumcision. I like every anti-circumcision Facebook page. First of all, not circumcision, male genital mutilation, or MGM. From now on, I will say male genital mutilation. Male genital mutilation is a very serious crime, just like female genital mutilation, and both are justified for similar reasons, whether it's religion or not even necessarily religion, simply preserving quote-unquote timeless traditions that should not be allowed to die out. Medical reasons have been advanced for both of them, and now pretty much no one, some people who still practice it. In America, pretty much no one would try to justify female genital mutilation on medical grounds, but many try to justify male genital mutilation on medical grounds based on flawed studies, and we all know it's nonsense. There's no significant medical benefit. In fact, it's actually very harmful. Most of the world does not practice routine infant circumcision, and men in other parts of the world, such as Europe, do not experience these serious problems due to not being mutilated, and many of the problems that do arise among intact men in America are due to medical malpractice, such as forcibly retracting the foreskin at an early age before it retracts naturally, and that could cause serious problems. But the main issue for me is that it's a human rights violation. It's a violation of the individual right to bodily autonomy. It's not like other parental decisions, such as deciding what diet a child will maintain, what type of education he will receive, etc., or what he will wear. It's completely different. It's a permanent physical alteration of a man's body, and therefore it violates the right to bodily integrity. And if you can't mutilate an adult without his consent, then you also can't mutilate an adult without his consent when he's a child. Mutilating an infant without his consent is absolutely no different than mutilating an adult without his consent, because that individual is forced to live with the consequences of that mutilation for the rest of his life. There is no way to reverse the effects of it. And I also think you can't tattoo a child without his consent, and I don't think very many condone tattooing a child without his consent. If you want to get a tattoo, you have the right to do so when you're old enough to make the decision for yourself. So male genital mutilation is just another cosmetic procedure, just like tattoos. So you have the right to mutilate yourself as an adult because it's your body, but you don't have the right to mutilate someone else's body. If you sever a part of my body without my consent, then you're implicitly telling me that I have the right to mutilate your body without your consent. At the very least, if you mutilate someone, you should be forced to at least provide some restitution for your victim. If nothing else, at least pay for whatever medical bills are necessary to do whatever is possible to reverse some of the negative effects of this mutilation. And there are some methods of foreskin restoration in the case of genital mutilation, and I think there are some ways of removing tattoos as well, though they are difficult, and none of them are perfect. There are serious problems with all of these means of reversing mutilation, and so mutilation is a very serious issue because it's so irreversible.
Hey, so basically, you're also saying that in indigenous tribes where they have the plate in the mouth, the same type of ruling or restitution would be sought and would be justified, correct?
I'm not familiar with this particular issue, but could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, in some African regions, in some indigenous tribes, they have people on the bottom lip. They put these discs in there, and over time they increase the size of the disc until it's really big, so the bottom lip is extremely big. And it makes it so that you basically have to have that little disc in there for the rest of your life, or else your lip will just be like...
Not only that, they also break out your bottom teeth so that saliva can continuously flow so that your lip doesn't dry out and split in half.
I've never heard of that one, but I would say the same argument applies to that as to male genital mutilation. It's just another form of body modification. If you want to do that to yourself, fine, but you can't force someone else to be subjected to that.
So the question is, how does a free society actually deal with this type of an action? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, we have no government anymore. So a parent goes ahead and does their genital mutilation of their child. You happen to be their next door neighbor. You see a rabbi driving up in the car, and you know that they're Hasidic Jews. What are you going to do? They just had a child. You know it's going to go on.
Yeah, that is a problem which I'm not sure I've completely solved myself, and I think there are probably a few ways that could be dealt with, and probably different societies would deal with it differently. We know if male genital mutilation were to be illegalized, we know it would be done then, but we're talking about a society in which there is no government, at least not as we know it. But even if there's no government, even if there's no monocentric law, for one thing, there still could be private legal systems. That is what is sometimes referred to as polycentric law, a system in which there actually would be competing bodies of law. So even without a monocentric extortion-funded legal system, it is possible that a private legal system could also deal with such atrocities committed against children or infants that can't defend themselves. But then, yeah, that could possibly be a slippery slope. If at what point do we limit the power of these private legal systems? What if they become a tyrannical system, just like governments, and they try to control every aspect of parenting? So there are problems with this. But I think it's pretty clear that genital mutilation is a violation of not just the rights of the child, but the rights of the adult that he will become.
I do think that restitution could be one easier in a polycentric system, because look around us today under monocentrism with the state. There's no way that male genital mutilation will ever be deemed as illegal. Nor will you have a court case. Most likely, will not have a court case come back and say restitution should be paid and for $15,000 to have reconstructive surgery or something like that, right? It's just highly unlikely. You might get that a lot more in a private sector. Not that everybody has to go along with the ruling. They might look at the ruling and laugh it off and say, I don't see that person as a criminal for doing that. And this would have a lot more incentive structures competing, right? So we'd have competing, competitive competition. And I think that the pressure from a lawsuit, you'd have more chances of winning it in a free society. Somebody would try and come out. I think that would help set a precedent quicker. And then on top of that, it would discourage future parents from doing it, saying, hey, you mutilated your son's dick. And now this other family, that kid actually won a lawsuit against the parent. If you're a parent down the road and you see some other kid just win a big lawsuit for circumcision, the last thing you're going to do, or you're going to probably think about circumcising your son a little bit more than you would when you have no financial risk, right?
Yeah,
that is true.
The polycentric law, as far as dealing with and preventing the action from happening, it doesn't fly, because basically the Hasidic Jew community has their own polycentric law firm that they subscribe to, and in theirs, circumcision isn't illegal. So they're not going to have any law over them that prevents them from doing it. But yes, I think that Michael's mentioning the idea that a lawsuit after the fact, when a person actually achieves age of reason and can file a claim of damages against the parents, if they successfully win, you're gonna see a lot less circumcision happening, because it's a very expensive prospect. If I were the judge, kind of picking out a number as far as how much this child has lost and is owed in restitution, I don't know. I'm thinking 85% for life. Everything that they owned, 85% of it is now the child's. 85% of all the things they produce for the rest of their life is now the child's. That's my restitution. But then again, I'm just really, really against circumcision. So I might be a little biased.
Hey, great stuff. Hey, let's move on to a new topic. We only got Yasha for about another 12 to 14 minutes, so I want to utilize this. Yasha, I'm looking at the political system today. How do you think we could utilize the 2016 election that's going to be coming up? Is it 2000? Yeah, 2000. No, yeah, 2006.
Yes,
yeah, 2016. All right, sorry. What do you think about people like Tim Moen, who is an anarchist sympathizer, libertarian party type guy? What do you think about anarchists going into the political system and actually keeping steady on anarchy? Do you even see that as a way to reach some percentage? Not that it's necessarily going to win anybody or elections or stop government, but do you think that's a way to educate people, or do you see that as harmful?
Well, if said libertarian actually holds true to anarchist principles, then if he actually is allowed to participate in the debates, then he could actually play a role in spreading libertarian / anarchist philosophy. So I think it is possible that he could reach some individuals by means of doing so. I know Ron Paul was my greatest inspiration at one time, and I think Ron Paul played quite a significant role in pushing me toward anarchism, even though he's not an anarchist himself. And I think the same could be said about many others. But I think their primary role is just to use the electoral process as a means of spreading ideas, and so I suppose it's an unintended positive consequence of a fundamentally evil system. And the purpose of such libertarians running for office is not to actually win, because I don't think they have much chance of I don't think they have much chance of success in the electoral process, because people like to vote to steal other people's money, and so even if they do get elected, they're going to have to compromise at some point. They're going to have to undermine the philosophy of libertarianism somehow at some point. I don't have much faith in the political system, so I think I'm not against them running entirely, but I don't think there is much hope of them winning, and even if they do win, I don't think much good could come out of that. Libertarians and anarchists in general are better off outside of government than in government. On the other hand, maybe in a place such as some parts of New Hampshire with a higher concentration of libertarians, maybe then it would be different. But in general, I don't think electoral politics is effective.
Fair enough. Kyron, you have a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we even refer to it as electoral politics. There's no process in which anybody is making any decision other than the people who are counting the votes. And ironically enough, those are the corporations that make the machines that take the votes. If you watch a documentary called Hacking Democracy, these machines are easily corruptible and more than likely are. So, like, you going out and vote doesn't even matter because of the Electoral College, which is a whole bunch of, 100 people making a decision for president. And even then, like, it's all smoke and mirrors. Like, you don't know what the hell's really going on. So even referring to it as an electoral process, I think is somewhat fallacious and problematic in and of itself. But
that's the thing, though. Even if the machines, to me, it's like, I don't care if the machines are tampered with or whatever, because the other candidate that was getting screwed over and cheated out of the win, he probably still sucked anyway, Right,
no, exactly.
I know. I'm with you.
The second point is that, it doesn't matter because you're still voting for statism no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
Everybody knows statism is slavery.
Okay, got another question that should be something you're familiar with. Yasha is on my friends list. I kind of check out some of the things that he talks about on a regular basis. All right, so let's just assume that you live in a completely voluntary society, no government again, and a person comes to the age of, let's say, 18. They figure out that there is no God, and they become an atheist, and they file a lawsuit against their parents because of all of the angst that they had felt in their life, causing them to be, they cut themselves during their childhood. They had emotional problems and so on, and they blame it on being threatened with the image of hell, being sent there by a God who would punish them for having been disobedient, for not having prayed to him, not giving their monies from their, as a child they had some jobs where they were working, and the parents said, well, you've got to tithe that 10% and things like that. So they're suing for the 10% of their money plus interest that they lost. They're also suing for emotional damage and so on. What do you think?
Yeah, that is a difficult question, and the similar question would be: could one sue one's parents for indoctrinating him to believe in the religion that is government? And I'm not sure I have a definitive answer to this question, because that if if an individual suffered that much psychological trauma and he actually physically injured himself due to this trauma, and he realized that it was all in vain. I'm not. I'm not quite sure. In this case, would he have a legitimate case to bring against his parents? Because after all, it's different than I'm not sure it's quite comparable to the issue of genital mutilation, because in the case of genital mutilation, the parents forced him to have a part of his body severed without his consent. In this case, the individual was not forced to physically injure himself. He chose to physically injure himself, and yes, he was under a significant degree of psychological trauma, but still he wasn't forced to cut himself. So I think it's a very different situation, and I'm not sure it can be compared to genital mutilation, but I do believe it's deeply immoral to threaten a child with hell, because I don't know if it should be illegal, because I think there is a possibility that individuals could alter their beliefs as time passes, and well, I mean, if one is indoctrinated to believe a certain concept such as hell, then yeah, some beliefs such as that could be difficult to get rid of. But I know of some people who have gotten rid of these beliefs where a physical disfigurement such as genital mutilation, there's no way you could ever get rid of that. But I'd say the main reason that it's immoral to threaten children with hell is that it is quite a powerful tool of coercion, because you could make you could manipulate an individual into behaving in ways that he would in no way behave if he were not indoctrinated to believe these lies such as hell, and the fact that it is a lie is another reason it's immoral. And in some cases it could be benign. I mean, not all people are going to commit crimes based on the belief in hell, but I think many will perform actions which are unproductive because of that belief, or well, at the very least, it destroys. I think it destroys it severely undermines their concept of free will, and if they didn't believe in hell, well, on the other hand, there could be some unintended positive consequences. I mean, maybe there are some positive aspects of certain religious doctrines as well. Maybe if I don't know, what if based on the belief in hell, one refrains from succumbing to alcoholism, where if one did not believe in hell, one would succumb to alcoholism. Now, I think that's unlikely, and I think there are numerous means of persuading an individual to not succumb to alcoholism than threatening an individual with hell. I mean, alcoholism is obviously not in the best interest of the individual, so there are many incentives not to engage in such moral vices. But I think the threat of hell could also be a very dangerous tool of social control, and it could be used to perpetuate horrible atrocities as well, such as male genital mutilation. There are those who would commit that crime even if they know it's an act of violence, because they believe if they don't, they will be punished by God. And so I think that belief that individuals must behave in a certain way or they will be punished by God. I think that's a dangerous superstition, and it could cause people to commit acts which they would never commit otherwise, and it could indirectly lead to the violation of other people's rights, such as children who are victims of mutilation. And so as for whether a child, or I mean an individual when he turns 18 could sue his parents for this, I'm not sure I have the answer, to be honest.
So, just as far as you're concerned, the act itself of saying if you don't do X, Y, or Z, you're going to hell, and hell is this fiery lake where you're going to burn and burn and burn and burn, is a threat of, or is coercion, is actually a violation of the NAP, or is it not?
Well, the strict definition of the NAP is that you have no right to violate the physical integrity of the person and property of
Or
others.
Like if I point a gun at you and shoot it, that's a violation, yes. But if I point the gun at you and say, if you don't do this, I'm going to shoot you, that also is a violation of the NAP. So
if you're pointing a gun at someone, then definitely. But on the other hand, there is no such thing as hell. It's a made-up concept, so it's not exactly the same as pointing a gun at someone. It's not you who are going to commit the act. It's a socially constructed entity that has no physical reality.
Well, it's kind of like saying there's this imaginary laser gun that will shoot you. Well, there is no imaginary laser gun. Those things don't exist. But it's a real threat. Yeah.
If somebody says to you in the alleyway, there's a sniper up on that roof, and he's going to shoot you in the head if you don't give me your money. Okay?
Gotcha.
You don't have to actually have a physical real gun, or the sniper doesn't even have to actually really be there. It's the threat that's the act, and if the person actually believes or feels that there is a potential of them experiencing the harm, there is no, even if there's some doubt in their mind, but they have some belief that it could happen, that is a coercive or threatening act.
It definitely is. That's an act of fraud. You're committing extortion based on a lie essentially. So if you say give me your money or God will punish you, and God doesn't actually exist, I guess the case could be made that it's an act of fraud. But I don't know if the person actually does believe, then of course he won't file a lawsuit. But if he realizes he was deceived, then yes, I definitely see that he could make a case that he was subjected to fraud, and he could legally make a case against that extortionist. So yes, if you're trying to exploit someone based on a lie, even if that person believes the lie, if he later realizes that he was lied to, then yes, I think he could.
All right,
make
guys.
a case that he was violated.
All right, guys. We got to go for the night. Yasha, great discussion as always. I thank you for being here tonight. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we'll have you back on soon. All right, guys.
Yasha, real quick, if you do want to join us in the After Hours show, please just I'll send you a link here, and we can continue the conversation there, or talk about other topics if you'd like to join us. So just let me know on Facebook, and I will send you the link.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, I'm going to put the link for the After Hours with the Krug here after the video is done going live, so you guys can check that out. Or just go to go to youtube.com/voluntary virtues, and you can find the After Hours live right after. Just refresh the page until this one goes away and that one starts up, right? But obviously a great time over at the After Hours with the Krug. Always a great discussion. My closing statement for tonight, it's really a question that I kind of want to end with. This is a Reddit self.ask Reddit. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about here. The guy asks, so if my deodorant could be a bomb at the airport, why are they just chucking it into the bin? I mean, if it's just harmless deodorant, which is going to be the excuse they say to us after they take it, then why are you taking it from me? But no, he didn't say this. The guy who ended up going to the airport last and writing this comment, he didn't say anything aloud. He says, like everyone else, I didn't want to say or do anything that would jeopardize making my flight. So I just turned around and walked towards the room after security, where they just happened to sell deodorant. All right, guys, that's it for us here on Voluntary Virtues. As you guys know, After Hours with the Krug, go to youtube.com/voluntary virtues or head over to the voluntaryvirtuesnetwork.com, and in the right-hand side, you can find the live video popping up in our feed. You got to love that aspect of it. Hope you guys liked our last comment for the night as well. Check out this show every Tuesday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Voluntary Virtues Roundtable. I thank you guys so much. Thank you, panel, for another wonderful show, as always.
No problem.
Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.